So for a quick review, we've talked about the 7 chakras. The chakras are the sort of fundamental energy centers that make up our spiritual, our energetic integrity. So if the backbone, the spine, is the vertebrae that keeps us physically upright, it's the structure that keeps us physically upright, our chakras are sort of the energetic spine to our entire holistic being, and it contains information and energy points and centers through which we engage with life and we process energy and information, whether that be information related to our physical survival and our body, whether it's our emotions and creativity, whether it's our will in the world, our ego, our identity, our ability to give and receive love, our ability to communicate, to listen, to guide, to teach, to hear, to see, to vision, to have inspired vision, to have psychic or intuitive insight. All those are aspects of ourself and dimensions of ourselves that are governed by all the different chakra centers. So we talked about the root chakra, the very first chakra. It's the color red, and it's connected to primal instincts, basic survival, our foundation, the physical body. In a quick overview. Then our sacral chakra is related to our creative expression, reproduction, creativity, emotions, and it's the color orange. And as we move up the center, we go up into the solar plexus, which is yellow. And this is connected to our personality, our ego, our energy in the world, our will, the way we express that will. It's also connected to our muscles and our body, our gut instinct. It's connected there. Then we moved up into the heart center. The heart center is our ability to give and receive love, compassion, mercy, grace, support. It's also a very important healing center, as when we when we engage in hands-on healing or Reiki or any of those healing arts that involve touch, physical touch, that energy does flow through the heart center. This heart center is also the bridge between the lower chakras or the earthbound chakras that we just discussed and the upper chakras, or what are sometimes called the higher or spiritual chakras. So the heart's the bridge. It's where we integrate inspiration and creative intelligence, wisdom, our divine connection with the physical body. So that's why it's such an important center. Oh yeah, what's up, Jesse? What's happening, brother? It's a good man down there. I hope you're well, man. Thank you for all you're doing to serve our neighbors who are experiencing homelessness. You're a rock star. Marissa says, yeah, they're great. Haven't caught them all. They're helpful, focusing inward and tuning in. Good. Hey, Mary. Good to see you on here as well. So many lovely, friendly faces. My mom's watching. Hi, Mom. I'm going to Disneyland. Not really. Not right now. They took away the season passes. So the heart's our bridge between the upper and earthbound chakras. Then we moved into the throat chakra, which is our communication center. So this is, we talked a lot about this one and a lot about spiritual integrity and making sure that we're aligned in thought, word, and deed. Making sure that what we say is what we mean, and that we mean what we say, that we follow through with aligned action, you know, with our ideals and our visions and our values, our creative intelligence that comes in, that we take action that's in alignment with that. So spiritual integrity is a really important aspect of the throat chakra, as well as our voice. It's where we speak the truth. It's also where we hear the truth and discern any kind of deception or misalignment. Jesse says, nothing much. I'm well, man. I'm doing pretty good over here. Thank you. Good to see you on here. Thanks for stopping by. That was the throat chakra. It's the color blue. Oh, and the heart chakra is connected to the color green, just FYI. Then yesterday we talked about the third eye chakra, and we got into, this is our center where we have intuitive insight, psychic vision, creative insight, creative inspiration. It's our ability to discern. It's also connected to truth and justice. So this is where we are gifted with sort of this divine lens to see things from a higher perspective, to see things from a spiritual perspective as much as we can. It's where we can become more objective. It's where we can discern truth from falsehood. And it is where it's kind of the seat of our intuition and our psychic ability. It's a really important energy center. And as I discussed yesterday, you know, our ability to vision and to be creative and to have insight, to discern truth from fiction, or information from misinformation, and all those things, fantasy from reality. It's very much governed by this energy center. And so it's a very fine line. It's a very fine line between sort of mental health and spiritual genius or inspiration and insight, creativity and inspiration, and complete and total fantasy. So it's a very interesting energy center, and it requires a lot of grounding. And that was one of the things I talked about, is grounding is really important, because a lot of folks who are drawn to this work have a very active third eye chakra, and grounding is one of the great ways we can really want to pull that energy down into something real, which is this body and this experience that we have, and we become grounded in our vision and our ability to live that out. So finally, we're going to talk about the crown chakra today. So now that we've burned a few minutes doing a review, we're going to dive into crown chakra. So let's talk about it. Hi, Kiara. So I'm going to read from Awakening Soul Force, Practical Guide to Awakening the Truth Within. It's on Amazon. It's also on Barnes & Noble. If you feel compelled to pick it up, I would be humbled and honored, and would be greatly indebted to you for considering even giving the 300 and some pages any kind of thought or attention. It means a lot. If not, that's okay too. But we're going to read out of the book today, and we're going to talk about the crown chakra. So here we go. If you have questions, feel free to throw them in the chat, and I'll address them as we go along. Hi, Cheryl. Welcome. Bienvenidos. Crown chakra. You and I, we are one with God. We are the divine experiencing itself as human beings. We are human beings experiencing ourselves as divine. I know we've all heard these words. We've heard words like these before, but a few months ago, I had a revelation in one of my meditations in which this truth became crystal clear to me. You see, for too long, we've accepted this notion that God is our superior and that we are his subordinates. We believe that God rules over us, telling us what to do and how to do it. This is the top-down authoritarian view of God. Imagine how our lives would transform if we thought of a God not as a parent or a spiritual dictator, but as a partner, as a collaborator. How would our life shift if we saw God as a loving friend? As I meditated on this conception of God, I asked myself, well, what's in it for God for us to be having all this experience? Why create this at all? And then it hit me. As if my mind had been peeled wide open to allow the wisdom of spirit to emerge, I suddenly and very clearly recognized that we are a mirror for God. We are a reflection and a point of view from which God gets to know and experience divinity as we move closer to ours. In that moment, I felt the most beautiful, expansive sensation vibrating throughout my entire body. This is a true story. And I literally remember this experience, and I remember feeling like I wasn't being electrocuted, but it felt electrified. And my entire body from head to toe felt like I was on like a vibration plate. Or like, you know, when you put your finger on a battery or like there's a little charge, like, that's kind of what it felt like my whole body. It was wild. Those who love us unconditionally, our family, our friends, and our partners, hold a mirror up to us and say, look, this is who you are in my eyes. This you offer me, and this I offer to you. Think about the joy and the gift of sharing that bond and honoring and discovering that connection for all the wonder it brings. In this same exact way, we exist in relationship with our divine creator. No one else on this planet and nothing else in this universe is going to have our personal perspective, our unique blend of experiences, our interests, insights, and wisdom. In that way, the only thing God truly wants from you and me is to see herself, to know himself, to know and to experience themselves as God incarnate as you and me. Consider that the next time you sit in your meditation. Reflect on that the next time you look up into the eternal night sky. Take a moment and pause. Allow yourself to sink into the knowing that right in that moment, what you see, what you feel, and what you experience is directly linked to God. Your peace in that moment is God's peace. In the moments when you feel joy and wonder, or when you feel heartache and sadness, know that God feels that too. Know that your revelation and your spiritual growth unlock a new dimension of relationship with God. In remembering that this is, in fact, an equal relationship, that it works both ways, you can then open yourself up to what God wishes to share and offer you in return. After you've sent God your feelings of, say, hope or despair, know that in that instant, God will respond back and bless you with the love and the grace that is eternally yours to share. This is the gift of the Crown Chakra. So one of the other things that, this came from a different experience, but it's really, this has been, again, I've talked about how this whole journey is my journey, and I'm sharing it from my point of view, and I do it to offer up my perspective and a perspective that may or may not be helpful to you on your journey. So it's not to say that any of this is right or wrong or whatever, but in my process, and as it unfolded for me, what I just read here is a very, very real experience for me. And it's been, I don't know, months, a year after having this experience of letting that really sink in, like what this information means and how that came through, there was more revelation about sort of the excitement, the joy, the bliss that happens for us at a soul level, and for the entire universe, for God, for the collective consciousness, however you want to think of it. There's a sort of exhilaration and excitement when we wake up and we have an aha moment. It's kind of like if you've ever created something, if you knitted a sweater, if you made a movie, if you drew a really cool piece of art that you really liked, if you created a baby. If you've ever done something that's creative, you know that there's like this little rush that comes with it that's like, whoa, that's totally awesome. I did that. That's really cool. That's, it's sort of addictive. That's how this experience to me feels, or how I imagine, or how it's been shared with me, that the experience from like the perspective of the collective consciousness. Marissa says an epiphany. Yeah, anytime you've had an epiphany, we're like, oh, that's what that means. Okay, got it. I see it clearly now. Those moments of like, wow, that insight. Every time we have those flashes of insight, every time we have that rush of like, oh, I get it. That's a part of it's a part of God waking up to itself. So it's as if this collective universe was a gazillion, bajillion, that's not a real number, light bulbs that had been turned off. And God's kind of like the power source. And it's like, I want to see my light. And then bing, one light goes on. And it's like, ooh, cool, there's some light. Bing, another one goes off. And now there's more. And it's like, there's an excitement. There's an exhilaration. There's a journey to that point every single time. So it's as if we could become conscious of every single one of our cells having its own awakening, having its own epiphany, our own cells becoming conscious of themselves and their gift and their value and the contribution they make to this whole body. Imagine if we could like feel every little bit of that. We could become aware of it. When a cell goes, oh, I know my role. I'm a heart cell. I'm a brain cell, and this is what I do. I'm a white blood cell. This is what I do. I'm a skin cell. This is my job. This is how I contribute to the whole. And we became conscious that every one of those little revelations, like to me, that's kind of what this journey is from that perspective. That we get to have this epiphany, as Marissa called it, this awakening, this expansion of our consciousness outside, from this tiny myopic point of view of the world. It's like, oh, okay, here I am, self-centered, egotistical, and all the world revolves around me. And we grow from that little, that little ocular lens of consciousness to like it gets bigger and wider, and we let more light in, and we realize it's not just about us, and there's more, and oh my gosh, there's way more perspectives than just mine. And there's this, not only that, people to people, but there's a planetary perspective. There's perspective from the animals. There's perspective from the plants, from the trees. Hi, Kate. Good to see you on here. There's a perspective from all the planets, from the universe. Yeah, it's like, boom, all of a sudden our mind's blown and we're expanding. It's like a very wondrous place to step into. It's been a nice revelation for me, and it's the thing that continues to drive me in trying to understand and to look at the world with more loving and kind eyes, is to understand that that's the process. That I shouldn't hate and judge on people or things because it's just a part of God waking up to God's self. And so we should enjoy the exuberance and the excitement of that little piece waking up to itself when it does. Sometimes that's not always an easy thing to do. Yay, Kate made it for one chakra, the crown chakra. So let's dive into what this thing is after I talked about my own little experience there. So the color this is connected to is violet. It can also be connected to white. I didn't put that in the book, but that's just something I wanted to throw in there. White light is often connected to source. Location, the crown chakra is connected to the top of our head. So we have the third eye, crown, third eye, throat, heart. Just above the belly button is the solar plexus. Just below the belly button is the sacral, and at the base of the spine is the root chakra. What it is, the crown chakra is our direct link to the divine source of creation. This chakra is one of my personal favorites because it represents the essence of this entire journey. The remembrance that we all have a direct link to our divine source of creation and the reconnection to our own living, breathing soul force. Experiencing unity and realizing that every single thing in this universe is connected is the gift of our crown chakra. Heck yeah. So can we live that ideal? Can we integrate that ideal into our vision, into our thoughts and our words that we speak, into our art that we create, into the love that we share, giving and receiving, into the choices we make, and the way we use our bodies, the way we build things with our bodies, the physical things we create? Can we integrate that perspective of unity and lovingness in the way we share and exchange emotions, the way we create and express ourselves? Can we integrate that knowingness deep into our physical body so that our physical needs are met? That we live a life that walks as a living and walking expression of that unity. Can we integrate that all the way down into us? That's the soul force journey. And that's when we get into what inspired Gandhi to call it soul force. He called it clinging to truth or love in action. And that's understanding God's love and understanding God's truth, the loving truth that we are one. Can we cling to that truth so that it inspires how we engage and interact, how we create in the world, how we communicate? That's the journey. Cheryl says, I've had an experience with white light. Cheryl, if you'd like to elaborate, go for it. I would love if you shared. I'm going to read some more. Body parts. Physically, the crown chakra is related to our central nervous system, brain, brainstem, cerebral cortex, and the spinal cord. As I've mentioned in every chakra talk, there are physical dimensions and I should say the chakras and the energy in the chakra centers influence physical body parts and physical manifestations. It influences emotions. It influences thoughts and mental energy. It influences emotional energy. It influences energy, period. The relationship that we have to energy in the world. Signs of balance. When the crown chakra is in balance, we feel a deep sense of interconnectedness and spirituality. We feel connected to our higher selves and the universe as a whole. We recognize and live in the awareness that we are spiritual beings having this human experience. We view our spiritual path and the path of others not as retribution or punishment for sins, but as opportunities to learn, to grow, and to know ourselves as the divine source from which we come. We enjoy the privilege of learning how to transform our spiritual truth and ideals into thoughts, words, and deeds that align with our highest philosophies. We also learn to surrender to this part of ourselves that holds higher perspective and live with the courage to make choices that serve our soul's highest purpose, even if those choices don't always play to conventional wisdom. In that way, we are unshakable in our faith and walk in alignment with our own highest spiritual, visionary qualities. So those signs of balance, it's a pretty lofty promise, I know. But that's a reality that we can really all touch. And I think part of the fun, part of the journey that we're on, the roller coaster, the play that we're engaged in is, well, how do we do that? How do we get to that space? How do we integrate those things? And what are we going to do with that knowing? But getting to that place where we've spent the time, we've done the work, we're working on seeing as clearly as we can, working on connecting with that perspective. Yeah, it's an important dimension of who we are. Cheryl has a very cool story. Cheryl says, it was at night when I had gone back to the cabin for the night. I'd been asleep, but was awakened by an enormous light that filled my mind. I had been fast asleep. It was the middle of the night. My mind was snapped awake by the bright light, and I heard the words, face the sun. Ooh, nice. That's beautiful. Cheryl, let me know if were there any feelings or sensations that came with the light? Because the intro to the book, I share an experience I had at the shamanic journey. And I talk about really this like incredibly powerful and luminous light that was part of that experience. And it was totally transformative. And I'd be curious if you had, and it came with all kinds of feelings. It was not just like I wasn't just seeing it with my mind's eye. There was a serenity and a peace, a comfort and like a warmth that is unlike anything I'd ever felt. So I'd be curious if you had any other sensations with it. Oneness, yeah. Like just not separate, totally connected to everything. That's beautiful, Cheryl. Thank you for sharing. Appreciate that. That's the signs of a balanced crown chakra. that connection to oneness, that beautiful light. So let's get into where the work usually is for us. Causes for imbalance. So these are things that we can look at and reflect on and see, okay, is any of this playing into my experience? And then we're going to talk about the things that we can do to recognize it if something's out of balance, and then things we can do to fix it or energize it or repair, heal, renew, renovate. How many words do you want me to use? I'm just like a thesaurus, just throwing out as many as I can. Causes for imbalance. Crown chakra blockages can be created by self-limiting beliefs peddled by religious authorities. I'm going to be honest. If I could take that line back, I would, because the word peddled carries it's a little bit more weighty than I think where I'm at right now. A little bit of judgment in there, and I don't know. Anyhow, that's my own self-criticism. Fear of eternal damnation, going to hell, or being punished by God erodes our relationship with the divine and can lead to blockages of the crown chakra. That is where my little bit of my frustration with what has become of often dogmatic and organized religion is that it can dim our light, and that's exactly what we're getting at here. If it's too overbearing, if it's too strict, if it's too authoritarian, it's too in your face, it's bad, 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 punishment, 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 sin, sin, sin. Well, that's creating a massive blockage and a separation from this source. We're just being shamed, and that's a heavy energy to overcome. Indulging in acts of spiritual ego, such as persecuting someone for their spiritual beliefs, or feeling resentful because someone had an easier spiritual path than us, can also create a blockage in this energy center. If we find ourselves jealous of another person's perceived spiritual progress or gifts, we are engaging in acts of spiritual ego and diminishing our own unique divine gifts, which throws our crown chakra out of balance. So this is an interesting one that I see happen. I had a friend that came to me specifically with this one time, and they were like, oh, I got this person in my life, they're having this massive awakening, but, they don't work, they don't do anything, they just are at home, they're living at home, they've got nothing else going on, and like went on and on and on about all this stuff and how like it wasn't fair, like, yeah, you can have an awakening because you're not doing anything, and that was kind of the tone. And I actually didn't even say anything. He goes, is that like ego talking? And I'm like, yeah, because these two people were on completely different life paths. One person chose a family and doing that whole thing and a conventional job and, kids and the whole deal. And the other one was someone who is not walking that path. And this person was specifically reflecting on, well, of course they can have an awakening. There's no stuff going on, And so there's frustration around that. And when we start to get into that, if we start to make our spiritual progress a competition, then we're starting to cut ourselves off from the natural flow of what this really is, because it's not a competition. No one gets a prize if you reach enlightenment faster or quicker or in any particular way, you know, compared to anyone else. Like that's not what this is. That's not what's going on. At least not from my perspective and my point of view. So when we get into that space where we start to treat, you know, our spirituality as like a competition, or we're jealous of people because well, yeah, they have time to meditate, I don't have time to meditate. I mean, that's not fair. When we start to do that kind of stuff, that then starts to also create a block. That can throw that center out of balance. When it's out of balance, how do we know it's out of balance? When the crown chakra is out of balance, we may physically experience issues with our nervous system, excuse me, our nervous or immune systems, epilepsy, Parkinson's disease, and multiple sclerosis. I love how I said that, sclerosis. And multiple sclerosis may be connected to an energy imbalance in the crown chakra. We may have skeletal and muscular issues, as well as experience a lack of coordination or exhaustion. Autoimmune disorders, cancer, and life-threatening illnesses can all be manifestations of an energy imbalance impacting the crown chakra. So again, going back to sometimes when there's physical things happening, I'm not saying that, that you're the cause of this or whatever, but when there's physical manifestations, I've found it to be a good practice when we have a physical injury or a physical ailment that we look to the energetic center that it is connected to seek healing, to seek clues or things that might be a little bit out of alignment so that we can realign them. And while that might mean, you know, it might not fix or heal the ailment, you know, you might not fix and heal the autoimmune disease or the Parkinson's or epilepsy, if that's something that you're going through, but there might be something there to investigate from a spiritual perspective. And that's why I wanted to include physical things with these descriptions of the chakras, because by the time they're manifesting themselves physically, like we're pretty deep in the programming. But knowing that, as the Buddha hypothesized or says, all disease begins in the mind, at minimum, we can at least do the reflection and get in there and say, okay, this is coming up for me. Like, this is what's going on. This is connected to the crown chakra. Well, am I being like super judgmental in my spiritual beliefs? Am I wrestling? Like, am I having a crisis of faith? Am I not maximizing this connection because I have some really, I'm sort of either saddened or misguided by beliefs that really didn't fit for me, but they left a bad taste in my mouth. Like, so those are reflections. We can use all these things as a way to just reflect and to look back at ourselves and wonder and figure out what can we clear out? What can we heal? What can we reconcile? How can I grow from this? So that's one of the reasons why I include these things in here. If we have an overactive crown chakra, so too much energy, it's like out of control, we may end up addicted to spirituality and neglect the needs of the physical body. We may be severely disconnected from earthly matters and become impractical or fanatical about our spirituality. This can also lead to spiritual arrogance, authoritarianism, and feeling spiritually superior to others. Overactivity in this center can also make us gullible and susceptible to spiritual brainwashing. So the thing that makes me I think about when I talk about that is there's a story about, you know, if you know the story of the Buddha, and the Buddha basically at some point in the Buddha's journey tries the path of the monastic, you know, the monk, and removing, you know, himself from society, and he's not eating and he's all that stuff, and he realizes his physical body is really weak and that he can't necessarily go about the business of reflecting and achieving enlightenment because he really can't focus, you know. The body is becoming so ill. So he kind of comes to this thing like, okay, well, how am I supposed to have this awakening or this awareness if I'm sick because I don't feed myself? So when I think of becoming like too fanatical about our spirituality or becoming disconnected from earthly matters, yeah, sometimes when we're wide open up there and this connection is like, we might neglect the needs of the physical body. Again, the importance of understanding ourselves as an integrated, holistic being, that we have these 7 energy centers that are working together to ground and bring into being a sort of inspired vision and a creative intelligence that wants to live and breathe and be experienced. On the other side, and it works the other way too, is that we're having physical experiences that kind of send information back up, you know, to the cloud. And that's all working together to create this experience that we're having called life. So just something to think about. Abandoning the needs of the physical body isn't necessarily a spiritual thing, because we're here. We chose to have this body and have this human experience. We wouldn't be here otherwise if we wanted to just neglect the body. So something to think about. If that's where you're at on your journey, don't take my word for it. Figure it out. You know, that's what we're here to do. We're all here to have an experience. I'm just sharing stuff that I've come to on my journey in hopes that it might flip open or flick on a couple lights. If we are lacking energy in this center, we may feel abandoned by God, disconnected from our highest self, and lacking in purpose. With that comes confusion, hopelessness, and spiritual depression as a result of feeling disconnected from soul force or our spiritual life force. We can also suffer from being overly cynical around spiritual matters, or on the flip side, being chained to dogmatic or limiting religious beliefs. When this chakra is underactive, we may feel misunderstood, we might lose our conscience, and we may perhaps even feel suicidal. So these are some things to consider if we're moving through a moment when we're feeling this kind of stuff. Know that turning to God, turning to meditation, turning to prayer, these are things that we can immediately do to start to kind of jumpstart to make this reconnection. We can also start with mantras. I honor the divine and the divine in me. I am one with God. I am one with the universe. And remember, saying these things, working on mantras, is not just about saying them, but it's about putting ourselves into the essence of what that statement means. So in our mind's eye, well, really with all of our chakras, think about tapping into what that feels like, what that means. With all of your senses in being, I honor the divine. What does that mean? What is the essence of that? And the divine in me. I am one with God. Like, step into that space. Don't just say it, but step into it and feel it. Feel it. What does that mean to be one with God? What would that feel like? Even if you imagine it. Like I said, the line between imagination and spiritual genius and mental health crisis are very thin. It's very thin. That's why a perspective that I discovered in shamanism was when a shaman sees folks suffering from mental illness, they don't see it as a mental illness or a disorder. They see it as somebody who's energy sensitive. They see it as someone who's tapped into different dimensions of consciousness and needs love and support and guidance and what's the word I'm looking for? They need support to help understand it, to work with it, because something's going on there. If I filled out, I went to therapy a couple years ago. I was in therapy after as I was going through a breakup. And I remember like filling out some of the questionnaires, and I was like, I don't know if I should answer some of these questions, because I know if I answer them, honestly, they're probably gonna think I'm like not well. And that's not where I was at. And I don't mean to like make light of it or anything, but I was aware of that. I'm like, oh yeah, like I hear stuff, and like I have visions and I see things, and I think I'm connected to God. And some of those things, if you look up the clinical definition of having something like working with bipolar disorder or schizophrenia, you'll see like symptoms. They'll call them symptoms, but you'll see signs. You're like, oh, that's actually not that far from where I'm at. There's like 10,000 characters that live in me. Tell me an actor or an actress or a writer or a creator or a musician who doesn't hear things, like doesn't have different characters and vibes. Like, it's a part of us. And whether or not that's in balance, I think that kind of determines where we're at, but also something to think about. So step into that though. Imagine what it's like to be one with the universe. Imagine what it feels like to be one with God. The reality is the imagination is not going to be that much of a stretch. Kate says, love those questionnaires. Yeah, like Kate, perfect example, Kate. Kate, do you answer those? Like, do you answer them honestly? Now, luckily for me, the therapist totally cracked me open. I don't know, maybe it was the second time I went and talked to her. I came out with it. I was like, yeah, like I'm super intuitive, and like I'll channel messages, and it sounds like dictation, and I can bring through information, and I feel people's feelings, and I can hear their thoughts and all that stuff. And she was super into it. And so that was a cool thing for me. I was like, whew, okay, not gonna be committed today. Good thing. Kay says, no, never. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, but you know, that's part of, in all seriousness, I mean, I'm kind of having some fun right now, but in all seriousness, that's part of like the shift that we're going through. We're starting to understand more and more about consciousness and what we are. And there's just a lot more to us. There's a lot more to us as people. There's a lot more to this world. And we're learning, we're discovering. And it's just, Derek says, I do, but give a warning. Yeah, she was a great therapist. She really was. I agree. Yeah. This is, and again, this is not at all to make light of, you know, what can be very serious, you know, and pressing mental health crises. Like, these are things that we have to address. But also, I think, at least for me on this journey, I've come to, my perspective has shifted from like a clinical perspective to going, I don't know, maybe there's something there, you know, like there's people that are really creative. These people are highly sensitive, you know, and a lot of times this stuff is brought about by like traumas, you know, that kind of trigger things. So yeah, we're complex energetic beings. We're complex conscious beings, and there's a lot to learn there. It's a lot to learn there. Totally went off on a tangent, but y'all are so cool and supportive. So thanks for walking that path with me. All right, let's get into the good stuff. How do we charge this energy center up? How do we bring in positive energy? Pretty simple stuff. I don't think I mentioned it, but I'm going to say nature 100% is a go-to for me. When I am out in nature, sans people and other folks running around, and I'm connected with just like trees and the river that's running by or whatever, like I love nature. I love it. Nature makes me feel connected to that. This is a place where we can feel the immensity, the wonder of our connection to God. Kate says, I respect the need to know some of these questions. I just sometimes, yeah, it's a lot to explain. And if somebody's not open or curious or has explored that at all, then they might be like, yeah, and they're writing you a prescription, and that's not cool either. Not to say that you don't, sometimes we need that, but I'm just saying that it's a big story to tell. So I agree with you. I really agree with you, Kate, that it's a lot to get into. Generating positive energy. Meditating on our connection to the divine, to love, to our most expansive soul force is extremely important to balancing the crown chakra. This is the energy portal through which we connect to the universal soul and is the gateway to establishing and honoring a relationship with higher dimensions of love and wisdom. There are practices and exercises we are going to discuss in later chapters that will give you some tools for connecting this aspect of self. Quiet time, stillness, and meditation are essential to creating a thriving connection to the divine through our crown chakra. Practicing yoga is also an excellent way to open and balance this chakra. Showing compassion towards others, walking in faith, connecting with your spiritual community or tribe are also great ways to bring positive energy flow into this energy center. The last, what I did not put in here in this chapter, I talked about it in another chapter. I think it's the inventory. Yeah, it's the inventory chapter. The way I best think of it is, and for me, what helped is thinking of God as like a family member or a friend, or that energy and that vibration as something or someone that I'm gonna reach out to and like build a relationship with. Until that was kind of my intention, to me things don't click all the way. And so that's not to say that meditating and praying and getting quiet is the only way to do it. You know, you got to find what works for you. But it is about finding a way to engage in a dialogue with this higher dimension of intelligence, this higher dimension of awareness. And that could be through music. It could be through art. It could be through the crafting that you love to do. It could be through being really present and immersed in, you know, your parenting or whatever it is. You know, God's everywhere, and you can find God anywhere, and you can make that connection, and technically you're in relationship with God all the time. But it is about, to me, making that connection to that perspective and the wonder that is beyond just this physical experience, that what we're seeing, touching, tasting, hearing, and smelling. So it's kind of, it's an intentional outreach. It's an intentional connection. It's a FaceTime instead of a text with God. You know what I mean? It's saying, hey, I'm going to be here and sit here with this vibration, with this energy, invite this awareness in. Because like I talk about in the inventory chapter, I talk about, you know, there's this sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like armchair psychology. It's like, oh, you're the 5 people you spend the most time with. So the 5 people you spend the most time with seem to shape us in some ways or another. And so there's kind of this idea that we're the 5 people we spend the most time with. And in the inventory chapter, I do mention, imagine like time with yourself specifically as one of those people, so that you get to know yourself. You know, this is a guide to that process of awakening. And my process and my journey was, I had a hard time distinguishing between what was me and what was the world around me, because I'm super sensitive, I'm intuitive, I'm like a sponge, right? And so I sometimes was very unclear about, well, what's the influence coming from friends and parents, teachers, what I'm watching on TV, the music I like. I kind of had a hard time putting my finger on that until I took time to be by myself. And then I was like, oh, that's my vibration. These are my thoughts. These are my feelings. And then from there, once I got to that point, then I had to like deconstruct that, you know? And then from there, we invite sort of what I like to call loving awareness. I know we talked a lot about, you know, connecting to God in this chapter, but if there's a term that maybe has less baggage than just even the word God or the universe, is just like loving awareness. So setting that intention to connect to loving awareness, and loving awareness being a friend that we sit with and we talk to and we listen and we try to understand that perspective. Like that then becomes one of those 5 friends that influences us, and that can be really transformative for us. If you want to. If you want to. So I have to say, all this talk about chakras and all the things I'm talking about today only matters if this is the journey that you want to be on. You know, is this the journey you want to be on? Do you want to live a life inspired by higher dimensions of consciousness or awareness or creative intelligence that wants to come through and be expressed through you? If that's what you want, cool, choose it. And here's my experience making that choice, and that being an intention of mine. But you don't have to. You don't got to do anything. I just know that we're all gathered here because I think collectively the people in this group have said, oh, this is something I'm interested in. Derek says, many doctors seem to see things from one side perspective, and it's extremely difficult. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I'm sure you have some experiences to share. It's true. You know, and we are all guilty of that. Technically, we're all guilty of having one perspective. It's sort of what it's kind of the blessing and the curse of what we're doing. It's like, that's part of the function, is to be a perspective. Getting outside of that perspective can be something pretty enlightening. Marissa says, like, we have to start with coffee before dinner and dessert. If you want to look at it that way, sure. Explaining the passion and purpose of this work is conversed after the questionnaires. Awareness of spirituality and the opening up to be able to speak of it, I feel, is paramount in helping and healing, if it is for you. Yeah. Inspired in spirit. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, it's an interesting journey that we're on. And now that we've gotten to the end of the Crown Chakra, the, no pun intended, crowning sort of destination, the crowning achievement of this journey is to get up there and be like, that's my connection. You know, I'll be so interested to hear, now that we've had this conversation all the way through, you know, what questions come up. Be curious if you have any thoughts on, you know, what's resonated most for you, or if this was helpful in any way. Let me know. Definitely let me know. But, you know, not a bad place to end here. And we've talked about the deconditioning thought experiment in all the other chapters. So for anybody who has not caught that, one of the things we've been talking about, and I'll wrap this chat up with this last bit about the Crown Chakra and sponsoring thoughts. A sponsoring thought is a fundamental idea or belief that precedes the creation of all other thoughts. It's the philosophical soil from which the seed of our life springs and grows, which will determine how vibrant our life may potentially grow to be. So when it comes to the crown chakra and we're doing work in this area and we're reflecting, it is, I think, a great practice to really get in there and look at what are my spiritual beliefs? What are my core spiritual ideals? What are the tenets of, you know, my spirituality? Looking at those things just to understand them, you know. And I'm at a point in my journey where I almost don't want to refer to them as beliefs, because so much of what I've stepped into at this point is a result of like undeniable experiences. So one of the things I've always appreciated about, you know, the medium John Edward is he's a very practical dude, super talented medium, super gifted in that way, and he's just very grounded, you know. And I think growing up in a house where my dad is very logical and there's reasons for everything, but he's also, you know, he's very a healthy skeptic of everything, likes evidence. That has shaped some of my perspective too, you know. And my mom is very analytical as well. So despite those influences, there's just been like repeated, and there was an openness to these things, but there was also kind of repeated things that I couldn't deny. There were dreams, you know, there were premonitions or visions, feelings and intuitions that just like kept coming out, kept coming and coming. I couldn't really deny them, so I would kind of like cautiously explore them or play with them or whatever. And it's been years, you know, it's been 22 years since I saw my first psychic, and it's been 20 years since I found meditation. And it's really been 20 years that I've been flirting with all this stuff, and about 10 years where it's been really serious for me, where it's been a serious pursuit. More than that, maybe a little more than that. In college, I did some deep dives, fell off the wagon for a minute, fell into a black hole, and then came back out. So it's a journey. It's a journey, and I don't know what else I want to say about it, other than analyze those fundamental beliefs, those guiding thoughts, those guiding principles. What are the thoughts? And if they are beliefs, look at them and why do you believe them, you know? Because I went through a process of deconditioning, you know, where you start to just throw stuff out and you're like, no, that's a belief, that's a fantasy, that's not real. That's a story I was told, you know. I don't have an experience that tells me that. And so it's like I did a massive hard drive wipe at a certain point where I'm like, yeah, that information's not serving me, or it doesn't make sense, or it doesn't align. And okay, so we're just gonna get rid of it, and like really moving into that direct experience. And that's where, you know, Krishnamurti has been such a wonderful teacher. If you've never read any of Jiddu Krishnamurti's works, I highly recommend it. Even if you pop onto Instagram, has some good feeds, some Krishnamurti feeds. But Krishnamurti was so focused and concentrated on reality. And when he talked about reality, he talks about those moments of perception and experience that exist beyond any labels, and all the boundaries are gone. There's no labels, there's no projection. He's like, we're just like really militant about seeing the world clearly. And having his philosophies and ideas brought into my life at a certain time were just like a wrecking ball for my conditioning, you know? And it's a practice that I developed through like reading his work and really finding a kinship with his spirit and the way he approached things. And it was just like being really diligent about trying as much as we can to just knock the gunk out and to knock away projections and to not be clouded by even past experiences, right? It's about, he talks about, you know, can you see the tree for, it's just a tree. Can you just see it and not as a tree? You don't see it as a tree. It's just you are experiencing it. You're with it. And he talks about moving into this sort of transcendent space where we're not projecting anymore. We're just in relationship, in the moment, very present with what's right there in front of us. A lot of profound stuff. That does not do any justice to how transformative his thought and his works have been on my life. And I know my friend Tab would probably say the same. Jiddu Krishnamurti, Jiddu Krishnamurti, Krishnamurti, a fantastic philosopher, what I would consider one of the greatest sages of our time. And he has a place in Ojai that I've been to a couple times with my buddy Tab. And I visited on other occasions too. But he's got a library there, and it's a really good, he's a great read for deconditioning. He's amazing. So we talked about the crown chakra. We talked about what it is, when it's out of balance, what it means, how to connect to it. And I'm leaving you with what I'm going to call like a deconditioning wrecking ball. So if you want to take on any kind of homework assignment, we've done the deconditioning thought experiment several times together in all the other chakras. I highly recommend reading, listening. You can go on YouTube. You can go on Facebook. If you look up The Immeasurable on Facebook, you'll find a page that is dedicated to, they basically publish quotes, and they also do little videos where they grab some of his recordings from his live talks, and they'll string it together in like a 3 or 4 or 5 minute piece. Absolutely transformative. Like I said, it'll take a wrecking ball to the ego, which is what we're all trying to we're all trying to blast apart, you know, to get us to a place where we see ourselves and the world a little more clearly. And then when we get to that space, well, can we let something new in, something creative, something loving, something kind, something innovative? That's what this journey looks like for me. So I'll you know, I won't project that onto you, but I know we're all here because we want to lead better lives. So Derek says it's been helpful. Good. Yeah, The Voice of Knowledge is a fantastic read. I would highly recommend. I don't know if I've actually checked out the meeting between Krishnamurti and David Baum. I might have seen excerpts and clips or like quotes, but I'm going to have to check that out. I'm going to look into that, Cheryl. I know you're a JK fan as well. I always love, you know, my friend Tab introduced me to Krishnamurti, and we had a lot of chats about his work and perspective. And it's always fun to meet other people who are into Krishnamurti, because he's really not everybody's cup of tea, because he's brutally honest, and it's refreshing. But if you got a fragile ego, or if you have fragile beliefs, like, yeah, you should pick it up and see what happens. You learn a lot about yourself. I know I certainly did. So, all right, everybody, it's time to sign off for me. I want to thank you all for joining me. I'm going to post this on YouTube. It's going to go up in the announcements. Thanks for being here. I hope this has been helpful for you. I appreciate you allowing me to hold this space and to just to talk about these things, to share my journey. It means a lot to me. You know, I was telling Rebecca earlier that I just, I love it. I just love this stuff. This is something that gives me a lot of juice, and I get a lot of energy, or sort of an injection of energy and inspiration from just being able to share this space with you all. And a lot of it's because y'all are, you know, you're engaged and you're amazing people, and it's really cool to have the exchange, and it's nice to have a space to just share my experience. So I appreciate it. I'm off to have some tacos. My mom's making some tacos. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Thank you, Kate. I appreciate you a lot. Thank you so much. Everybody blocked you, Kate. Nobody wants to see your comments. I'm just kidding. All right, everybody, have a great night. I will be on soon with some new round of discussions or talks. But for now, thanks for joining the chakra discussion, and I hope it's been helpful for you on your journey. Have a good night.